Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running super villain role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Dungeon Master, and in this one, we're going to talk about the time we destroyed Hogwarts. At the top of all of this, here's my first disclaimer. If you are a fan of Harry Potter, this is not the episode for you, right? You're not going to like this one at all. I'm telling you right now. So you might want to check out something else that we ran. We've got a lot of good episodes on this channel. This is just not the one for you. Um, so before we kind of get into it, I feel like I need to back up a little bit and I need to talk about some out of game stuff first so that the in game stuff makes sense. The first thing is, I remember the first time I ever heard Harry Potter is I was dating a girl, and I won't mention her by name because I don't want to throw her and her family under the bus. But she had a catastrophic irrational attraction to Harry Potter. And we had met on I can't remember what it was called. It was before MySpace. But at any rate, we met online, seemed to hit it off there. I was showing up to her house then on weekends so that we could go on a date or whatever. And she was this girl that like you could say nice weather we're having or something like that. And her response would be like, "Oh, well, here's what spell you would cast from Harry Potter to make the weather nice." And I'd be like, "Okay, cool, man. So where do you want to go to eat?" "Oh, I wish I could eat at the cafeteria in Hogwarts." It was just like on and on with that, right? So I have never seen a Harry Potter movie. I have absolutely no desire to watch one, right? Because sometimes for me, it's really hard to separate like a movie or a franchise or something like that from someone you might associate with it. You know what I mean? Like for instance, the movie The Crow. I had a really, really bad experience with a girl when I saw the movie The Crow, and I still won't watch it. I still can't. I just can't. So, so there was that. And then I had a bunch of friends who worked at Best Buy. Like my best friend at the time, he was in the Best Buy Geek Squad, where you take in a laptop or whatever and he'd fix it, that kind of stuff. And he was a regular at my comic book store. And then a bunch of the other guys on the Geek Squad became regulars at my comic book store. And they hated Harry Potter because all of the girls who worked at Best Buy, and mind you, back then, at least at our local Best Buy, it was almost entirely like high school girls. It was like 80% high school girls and then like 20% college students. Well, I guess I should say 19% college students. And then the other 1% were like a middle-aged manager here or there or whatever. But that was incredibly rare, right? And so all these girls, whether they were in high school or college or whatever, loved Harry Potter. And it's all they ever wanted to talk about. And so all the guys on the Geek Squad were just sick of hearing it, right? And when I had my comic book store, right next to me was an Enterprise rent-a-car. And there was this guy who worked there, and he was a nice guy. He was kind of squirrely. He liked to play practical jokes on people and stuff like that. His favorite superhero was Deadpool, and I'm sure it was because he related to Deadpool. And he had a very dark sense of humor. And he would watch horror movies, which not really my thing. Like for me personally, I'm always more of a sci-fi kind of a guy. Um, but he loved horror movies, and like the more bloody and gory and twisted, the more he liked it. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to say anything bad about his character. I've never seen the guy in real life like be rude to somebody or whatever. But in terms of entertainment, he really liked dark stuff. And he married a girl who was actually the cashier in my store. So he was coming over to to hang out with her all the time and so on and so forth. And she was another one of these girls that just would never shut up about Harry Potter. She was just talking about it like all the time, right? And so for me and my group of guys, and I understand this is regional, I understand other people have vastly different experiences with certain franchises and stuff. But for us, Harry Potter was for sure geared towards girls, young girls, because the older women I knew didn't, care about it at all. Um, and I think some of the language, I guess the word they're probably shooting for there is whimsy, right? Where a lot of the words like I'm not even familiar enough with the franchise to tell you the right words, like Hufflepuff or whatever Dumbledore, they're just silly words, right? And maybe you're so into it that you're desensitized and it's hard to take a step back. But for someone who's an outsider, right, to just hear those words, you're not super into it. And so, like, for me and all my friends, our favorite movies were always stuff like Terminator, Aliens, Predator, RoboCop, stuff like that, right? We kind of were more like R-rated sci-fi action movie kind of stuff. Or, for a more recent thing, most of us like John Wick, you know? So Harry Potter's just not our cup of tea. But then on top of that, our gaming group, this was when we were getting married, for the first time. And so a lot of the guys had a wife that would not shut up about it, or a girlfriend or whatever. And then, we had bills that we weren't really paying before. A lot of the guys had maybe lived with their parents before they got married. And if you had a job, you could kind of just quit a job willy-nilly, the whole 90s slacker thing that had to give way to the responsibilities of the 2000s. So the players are stressed out now. And I mentioned before, when my son was born, he did not sleep through the night. He had a lot of health problems. He did not sleep through the night till he was a 4-year-old. I'm not joking. So I was never getting enough sleep. I was tired. I was making bad decisions as a game master. And this game is a prime example of it. So, with all this stuff going on, we start to use the game for venting and we start to just play villains. And I kind of talked about that in some other recent videos. We had the Lochnar from Heavy Metal. It was in the game at this point. It's this glowing green orb that corrupts everything around it. It's making things get worse. So keep all that in mind. And so it starts off, and the one guy who works at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, who I will not say his name, because I'm sure he probably is not super proud of this now. He's so tired of his wife talking about Harry Potter. He comes to me and he's like, "So I want to run a dungeon crawl in Hogwarts, and we just want to wipe them out. We just want to decimate that place." And again, this is him venting. This is because just 24/7 in his life, he's hearing about, you know, the Humpty Dumpkins and their wibbly wobblies, and you know what I mean? And he's just so sick of it. And so he creates this character for our game named Ryu Shadowstrider. And the concept we come up with is I don't know how many listeners are familiar with the White Wolf games that include things like Vampire the Masquerade. But in the vampire role-playing game, there's this group of vampires called the Toreador clan, and they're artists. And one of the many things that they do is they will see somebody in history, like, say, Leonardo da Vinci, and they will basically say to themselves, it would be a shame if this guy died and all that talent dies with him, so on and so forth. We should bite him, turn him into a vampire to preserve him, which, by the way, we kind of did with our Da Vinci in our game world, but that's a story for another day. At any rate, so we came up with a knockoff of that idea where we came up with a completely unrelated clan of vampires. And instead of being art related, they were all warriors. And their thing was if they encountered somebody like Ryu Shadow Strider, who in feudal Japan was just the best of the best. He was just like the greatest swordsman who ever lived. He was like the king of unarmed combat, so on and so forth, right? He was just, as far as all that stuff goes, if you like movies set in that era and it's got like ninjas and samurais and all that stuff going on, that was what he was like as a human before they bit him. And then he's been alive since then. And so, like I said, at this point in the timeline of our game, we're just running a villain campaign at this point, right? So I had said something to him along the lines of what was the name of that Tom Cruise movie? Interview with a Vampire. I was kind of using that as a point of reference. Like, do you want to feed on rats or something? Like, what is your character like? And he was like, "Oh no, like I'm just a bad boy from day one. Like I'm a problem as a human." And he was talking about, and by the way, he was way more knowledgeable about that era and that part of the world and all the stuff they were doing. And so he had talked a lot about things that I never knew when I was young. Like what I can't remember now if it's samurais or ninjas. I want to say it was samurais. When they draw the katana out of its scabbard or sheath or whatever it is, right? And they they are drawing it in such a way they're going to strike you. When you think of like a European knight, you think of him kind of getting his sword out and readying it separately from the first time he swings at you and tries to hit you, right? Like these are two separate ideas. And the Japanese thing, it was like this one fluid movement. And what they were doing was geared around cutting off thumbs. Because if you could cut off your enemy's thumb, he had a way harder time holding a sword, right? And they were all about I'm going to like take you kind of like as a slave. I'm going to then try to sell you back to like either your family if they're going to pay the most, or I'm going to sell you to like the enemies of your family if they really, really want to be the ones who are going to, whatever, kill you or torture you or whatever. But I thought that was fascinating, right? And so he was kind of talking about he would do like these neck shots to people where he wanted to draw the sword and instead of aiming for the thumb. And by the way, I got to be careful how I put this because it would be really easy to word this the wrong way. You know how there's kind of like what things actually were like in Japan in like the feudal era, right? Versus there's sort of like the Hollywood cinematic stuff, right? So he was wanting to go more cinematic, right? So things that probably never existed in real life. He was more into that. He was admittedly drawing inspiration from anime, which is going to be a little more abstract. But so he was really into like pressure points. He liked these ideas of um like in certain things like Batman the animated series, there was a really cool episode where Batman has this enemy from when he was going around the world learning how to, be a martial artist and stuff, and the enemy has mastered this killing touch where he can kind of just like poke you in the sternum and you die from just a poke. So Ryu wanted to be able to do that. He wanted to do stuff with acupuncture needles where he wanted to be able to like run past you and throw one and have it stick in a certain part of your body and then you're just paralyzed because he has like a scholar of pressure points. And so we were building his character sheet and I was like, well, like the game mechanics kind of don't really support what you're wanting to do normally, but we can give you the following powers and we can give you the following bonuses and limitations and stuff like that. We can make it happen We just got to kind of go the long way around the bush to make it happen. So he does. So he's like a master of all this stuff. And so then his thing is, whereas normally the vampire, punctures you with the teeth or whatever, he wanted to draw the sword, and as the blood comes out, then that's how he's getting the blood. But he's like, I'm not going to eat rats and stuff. I'm going to eat my enemies, And so he portrays this guy as just this incredible, I was going to cuss, tough guy. We'll just call him a tough guy. Um, but yeah, he's a problem. And so his take on it was, because we were talking about ideas like, does he have a sense of honor? Are there things he would not do? Stuff like that. And I wouldn't say he had a sense of honor. I would say the character was really arrogant, supremely arrogant. And he was like, I'm not going to do certain things, but it's because it's beneath me, you know. So point being, we get to the modern day, and he's got a group of other guys. So there was another guy almost just like him, and he was an NPC named Ken, which was a bit of a Street Fighter joke to have Ryu and Ken, but I guess it's Ryu. Ryu is Japanese for dragon. Ken is Japanese for swords. They were supposed to both be Japanese names. But at any rate, they have this group of like assassins, right? And it's almost like Team Deadpool in a way. But going back to Vampire the Masquerade for a second, in the vampire system, they call it by another name, but what it really is superpowers. And so you would take a power like celerity, for instance, is what they call super speed, but it really is just super speed. And then on your sheet, they got a thing where you write celerity on the line, and then there's like 5 dots, and you color in the dots where, one is like you're relatively slow, and two is you're faster, three is you're even faster, five is you're maxed out. Um, but we were borrowing from that and this idea of this group of vampires we had invented, which were not from any existing franchise, had the ability to use superpowers. And so one of the things that Shadow Strider did is, if he fed on the blood of somebody who had powers, he got their powers at their levels. And he was gaining memories from it. I want to say the first Underworld movie I think just came out, and Celine, which, oh my God, Celine. But at any rate, Kate Beckinsale in that movie, I believe, could drink the blood of her enemies and then gain their memories. It seems like we were basing it on something else, but the idea was he wasn't bad at it. He didn't need like years to learn how to fire an energy blast or something. He could just drink the blood of somebody with energy blast, and immediately the following round have it and be able to use it just as well as they could. So this is another reason this guy's a massive, massive problem. And so he has already cut down countless enemies before he even gets to Hogwarts, right? But that's where this is going, is so they decide to attack Hogwarts. This group of villains, vampires. And I couldn't even tell you who all was in the group anymore because, like I said, as soon as the game was over, everybody felt bad and just kind of threw their character sheets away. So they weren't recurring characters. But the guy playing Ryu loved Ryu, and Ryu did not go away overnight, unlike the others. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. At any rate, so they go to Hogwarts. We ran it like a Dungeons and Dragons game where we had a map. We went room by room. I would say, well, here's because the girls helped us with the adventure, not realizing what the adventure was about. And when they found out what the adventure was about, my one friend, he had an apartment above mine. And so all the girls went up to that apartment, and they were honestly probably watching the Harry Potter movies on DVD or something. And then we were in the downstairs apartment and we were going room by room, just clearing the place out. And so what Shadow Strider did was he would kill the males and feed on them. And remember earlier, I kind of went into great detail about how he draws a sword. He was making called shots to vocal cords so they could not speak their spells. So he was rendering the girls mute and then he was keeping them as slaves, right? And and then he went through the guys and he was having the time of his life, man. Uh Lopping off various body parts and you get the idea. I mean, he was really like he's a fan of like Quentin Tarantino and like the Kill Bill movies where you'll cut somebody and there's just like a geyser of blood. That's kind of what was going on here. And he was shooting for again like kind of an anime kind of a vibe. But it was gratuitous. It was really, really over the top. And and so of course the teachers who are better at doing this stuff, he's cannibalizing these guys and gaining their powers, right? And so at the end of the thing, and I'm certainly not going to do a play by play, I we didn't record it. I wouldn't want to do it anyways, even if we did. Um, but at the end of the game, like I said, the John Redbridge character has now become an emperor. And so Ryu Shadowstrider goes to him because remember how I said they sell the slaves to various people? He goes to him, gives him these slaves as a gift, and then he's like, "I want to be your Darth Vader." That was his whole thing. Is he's like, if Redbridge is like Palpatine, basically, right? Then Shadow Strider wants to become Vader, and he's like, "So I just want to kill people for you. So you point me in the direction, and I will wipe them out." And then he was trying to play it off as kind of like how a Sith Lord, and this would have been in the when all the prequel stuff was in theaters, when we were playing this. Um, so people were on a big Sith Lord kick. And, we had heard the word Sith in the original trilogy back in the 80s or whatever, but we didn't have the understanding we did after seeing characters like, say, Darth Maul or Count Dooku. And so he, the player, was so into Star Wars and so into the Sith. Um, and yeah, that's exactly what he was shooting for. And so of course these guys can shoot lightning out of their hands. They have telekinesis, on and on with all these things that the Force lets you do. That's where he was going with this. And it's just instead of a lightsaber, he had a katana. And we even did bring in lightsabers eventually into the campaign. But yeah, this whole thing was like a very drawn out setup for him to try to do his take on like a Star Wars kind of thing. And just as Anakin Skywalker cut down the younglings, right? This was really him doing that same idea. So that is the famous Hogwarts adventure. Every once in a while, someone will ask me, so if your game has all these crossovers with all these different, pop culture franchises, what's going on with Hogwarts? I'm always like, well, I imagine the building is for rent if you're interested. It's been emptied out. But yeah, and I think I said this. A lot of the guys had a wife or a girlfriend or something that just would not shut up about it, and they were so sick of it. And again, babies crying through the night, all that. And so this was a big venting session, right? And going into it, everybody's like, yeah, 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 this sounds fine. This sounds cool. This sounds kind of funny. It's got kind of a robot chicken kind of a vibe. And then after we did it, it wasn't funny at all. And just everybody was like, oh God, like, man, I can't believe I played a game where we just wiped out a bunch of kids. Like you know what I mean? Like, ugh, nobody liked it. Except Ryu. He was like, no, no, that was awesome. What are you guys talking about? That was awesome, you know? Um, yeah, I remember the one guy, he was so depressed. Like my apartment, you'd walk out, I was on the ground floor. I was actually below ground level. So I had kind of like a little patio thing with like a maybe like a 5 foot wall or whatever, the edges of my patio. And the top of that wall there was like the grass and stuff. That was where ground level was. So if you walked out of my apartment door and hung a left, there was like stairs that went out, and then there was like a little landing there. Looking out at like we had a swimming pool in the backyard and stuff like that. It was a really nice place. I actually really miss living there. But my friend, who's the guy who lived upstairs, his girlfriend was upstairs with all the other girls watching the movies and stuff. Um, I remember him going out, sitting on the steps and smoking a cigarette. He just looked like he was on his fifth divorce or something. You know what I mean? Like he was just like, ugh. That was the mood at the end of that night. People were not happy. So, but like I've said before, I do these videos to let you know what we've done, whether it was good or bad. This one's bad. This one's obviously bad. So for all the people that want to leave a comment, it's like, I didn't like that one. Yeah, you and me both, buddy. I didn't like this one either. But it is what it is. Speaking of comments, while you're at it, make sure you check to see if you're still subscribed. And of course, smash that like button. That helps out the channel. The channel is growing. I'm thankful to you guys for that. Thank you, by the way, for sticking with us for the ups and the downs. You know, this is clearly one of the downs. But it gets better. This was sort of a brief period in the game, and it did not last. And we undid a bunch of stuff actually. And that's just a few years up the timeline from where we're at now. It's close, so things will turn around. But thank you so much for being here. From everybody here at the longest running super villain campaign on Earth. We hope you have a good one, and we will see you in the next disaster. Bye.